There are two kinds of quiet daughters in a house like mine. The first kind is quiet because she has been taught obedience so thoroughly that silence becomes the shape of her survival. The second kind is quiet because she is paying attention, because she has learned that in some homes, the safest place to keep the truth is behind her teeth until the exact moment it becomes useful. Parents like mine almost never know the difference. Not until a morning comes when a folder is pushed across a breakfast table, and the daughter they mistook for soft lifts her eyes and lets them see, all at once, what she has been remembering. My name is Fallon Hayes. I had been 18 for less than 9 hours when my mother slid a manila folder toward me over pancakes and said, in the same warm voice she used at church luncheons and charity dinners, "Honey, we need to talk about that money." My blood went cold. Not because I was surprised, because I wasn't. Before I take you into that kitchen, I need to take you back 6 months earlier, to the day I realized my family had not been waiting for me to become an adult. They had been waiting for me to become legal. It was October. The kind of Pennsylvania evening where the porch light clicks on before dinner and the air already smells like leaves giving up. I was in my room, half cleaning, half pretending I had more control over my life than I really did. On the top shelf of my bookcase sat my grandfather's cedar box. He had given it to me earlier that year, on my 17th birthday, the last gift he ever placed directly into my hands. I had not opened it in months. When I lifted the lid, the hinges made a soft whispering sound, like the box itself had been waiting for me. Inside was the same small collection of things I remembered: a pressed maple leaf from the farmhouse yard, a photograph of my grandparents laughing at their anniversary picnic, and an envelope I did not remember seeing before. Thick, white, sealed. My grandfather's handwriting on the front. Open only if something feels off about your mother before your 18th birthday. Call Daniel Mercer immediately. I sat down so hard on the edge of my bed that the mattress springs gave a tired little groan beneath me. For a long moment, I didn't open it. I just held it in both hands and stared at his handwriting until it blurred. My grandfather had been gone only a few weeks, long enough for the house to feel wrong without him, long enough for his voice to start living more in memory than in rooms. And yet there it was, proof that before he died, he had seen something I had only felt. Downstairs, I heard the brittle, careful sound of paper being handled in secret. Not the ordinary rustle of bills or grocery lists. This was slower, deliberate, documents being turned, aligned, folded, hidden. My mother's voice drifted up first, low and controlled. Then a man's voice, Derek's, my stepfather, lower still. I couldn't make out the words. I didn't need to. I put the envelope back into the cedar box and closed the lid with hands that had suddenly gone cold. Then I went downstairs, poured myself a glass of water, and walked into the kitchen like I had not heard a thing. The light was on even though it was almost 10:30, and my mother was usually in bed by then. She was standing near the island in her cream cardigan, one palm resting lightly on a stack of papers. Derek sat at the table with that heavy, loose-shouldered posture he always had after his second drink. He looked up first. "Oh," my mother said, smiling too quickly. "You're still up." I was thirsty. Her smile stayed fixed. "Long day?" "Kind of." No one mentioned the papers. No one needed to. The silence between us had become its own language by then. Looking back, I think that was the first time in my life someone had placed a weapon in my hands. I just didn't understand yet that I was holding one. My father died when I was 10 years old. His name was Nathan Hayes, and if I close my eyes, I can still see him in pieces that never quite blur. His silver pickup truck, the calluses on his hands, the way he would knock twice on my bedroom door before opening it, even though he'd never once found me doing anything worse than reading past bedtime. He left for a delivery run one foggy morning in November of 2018 and never came back. There was a semi. There was a wet road. There was a state trooper standing on our porch with his hat in his hands and sorrow already arranged on his face before he even spoke. My mother cried for 1 week. On the 8th day, she started talking about renovating the kitchen. By 2020, she had remarried. Derek Cole, contractor. Loud truck, loud laugh. The kind of man who made every room feel smaller just by taking up space inside it. He came with a daughter, Brielle, 2 years younger than me, who moved into the bedroom across the hall and brought with her a cloud of perfume, ring lights, and the kind of confidence that comes from never having had to doubt whether she was wanted. I learned 3 things quickly in that new arrangement. First, my mother hated tears. If I cried, she called it dramatics. She would close her face, exhale through her nose, and go stand on the porch with a glass of wine until my grief embarrassed itself back into silence. Second, she hated joy almost as much. If I laughed too loudly, she told me to lower my voice. If I seemed excited, she looked at me as if delight were a form of disrespect. Third, the only safe emotional setting in that house was flat. So I went flat. By 12, I had learned not to spend my feelings where they would be used against me. I saved them for my grandmother June's kitchen, where pies cooled under linen towels and no one ever told me to stop crying. I saved them for my grandfather Walter's tomato garden, where he spoke to me like I was a person and not a problem to be managed. I saved them for books, where other girls were allowed to feel things all the way through. My mother thought I had become quiet. I had. But not in the way she believed. Quiet did not mean obedient. Quiet meant I was watching. Quiet meant I was remembering. When my grandmother June died, I was 14. Breast cancer. The second round took her. I held her hand the afternoon she passed, and the last thing she said clearly to me was, "You are a good girl, Fallon. Don't let anybody rewrite that." I didn't cry in the hospital room. I cried in the parking lot, in the passenger seat of my grandfather's Buick, with my face folded into both hands while my whole body shook. My grandfather didn't shush me. He didn't look uncomfortable. He didn't tell me I was making a scene. He just sat beside me and said, "Let it out, Peanut. Nothing breaks from crying." He outlived her by 2 years. Long enough for me to spend one summer practically living at his farmhouse. I was 16. I read to him from the chair by the window. I watered the tomatoes, I cooked his eggs the way he liked them. Hard yolks, butter, salt. He moved more slowly toward the end, but there was nothing diminished in him. He got quieter, yes, but not smaller. More like a house settling at dusk. When he died in September, at 78, my mother wore navy to the funeral and cried in exactly the right places. Derek stood in the back and checked his phone. A few weeks later, the will was read. There was a trust in my name. The number made Derek's jaw go slack. A little over $680,000, most of it in blue-chip shares, some cash, and the proceeds from a small lot my grandfather had sold in Bucks County. The terms were simple. The assets had been set aside for me, but I could not control the principal until my 18th birthday. On that day, legal control would transfer to me. The trustee named in the paperwork was Daniel Mercer, my grandfather's longtime attorney. And attached to the formal documents was one handwritten line from my grandfather. "Your choice. Your life. Love, Grandpa." I remember lifting my eyes after reading it and catching my mother's expression across the room. Not pride, not tenderness, not the sorrow of a daughter grieving her father while watching his last wishes unfold. Calculation. It was brief, it was there and gone. But I saw it. My grandfather had left me a door. My mother, I would later realize, had already begun looking for a key. A man in a gray suit started showing up at our house not long after that. Wednesdays, usually around 4:30. Same car. Same leather portfolio. Same too-slick smile that never reached his eyes. When I asked once who he was, my mother said he handled insurance. Another week she said financial planning. Derek later called him a friend. The story shifted depending on who was listening. The portfolio never changed. In January, I came home early from the library because my shift had been cut short over a snow warning. I came in through the mudroom and stopped dead when I heard voices in the kitchen. My mother said once she signs, the rest is just paperwork. Derek asked, "And if she hesitates?" My mother laughed. It was a dry sound, a sound with no warmth in it at all. "Fallon will sign," she said. "She always does." Something in me went still. I stood there in wet boots with my pulse beating so hard in my ears it almost drowned out the rest. Then I pushed the door open loudly and called, "Mom? I'm home early." Paper moved fast. By the time I entered the kitchen, the table was spotless. My mother turned toward me already smiling. "Snow day?" she asked. "Want cocoa?" "Sure." On the counter, half hidden beneath her purse, was the corner of a folder with embossed letterhead. Barlow and Finch, Estate and Family Wealth Planning. Brielle came in just behind me and glanced at the folder. Is that about Fallon's money? My mother's smile didn't shift at all. Brielle, upstairs. Derek didn't even bother sounding gentle. Brielle rolled her eyes and left. My mother handed me the mug, laid one hand lightly on my wrist and said, "You're such a good girl." I looked right at her and said, "Thanks, Mom." Then I took the cocoa upstairs, shut my bedroom door, and sat on the floor beside the cedar box. That was the night I stopped being the daughter who didn't know. I just didn't tell anyone I knew. I opened my grandfather's letter 2 days later on a bench in Willow Creek Park. The swings were empty. The sky looked like wet stone. I tucked my hands inside my sleeves between lines, because the air kept biting my fingers numb. The letter was 1 page, my grandfather's handwriting. Steady, unhurried. "Peanut, if you're reading this, something has gone wrong with your mother." I hoped I would be mistaken. I never wanted to poison you against her, but I also refused to leave this world without leaving you a door. Daniel Mercer has been my attorney for 30 years. He knows everything. He is waiting for your call. You have the right to protect yourself. You have the right to choose. I believe you will choose well. Love, Grandpa. Beneath that was a phone number in careful block print. I stared at it for a long time, then I dialed. A receptionist answered first. A minute later, a calm, older voice came on the line. "Daniel Mercer speaking." I swallowed. "Hi. My name is Fallon Hayes. My grandfather was Walter Hayes. He told me to call you if..." I couldn't finish. He did it for me. "If something felt wrong," he said gently. My throat tightened so suddenly it hurt. "Yes." There was a brief silence, not awkward, just respectful. Then he said, "I'm very glad you called, Fallon." No one in that house had sounded glad to hear from me in years. He asked if I could come to Lancaster the following week. He told me to tell my mother it was a college financial aid meeting. Then he gave me one instruction I would end up building the rest of that winter around. "Do not change anything at home," he said. "Not your face. Not your schedule. Not one word. Let them keep underestimating you." His office was on the second floor of an old brick building on Prince Street. There was a green banker's lamp on his desk, a shelf full of state law books, and a fern in the corner that looked like it had survived mostly on stubbornness. Daniel Mercer stood when I walked in. He was in his 60s, maybe older, with silver hair and kind eyes that somehow made the whole room feel less sharp. He did not rush me. He explained everything slowly, like I deserved to understand it. He wrote terms down as he spoke so I could see them. Beneficial interest, fiduciary duty, irrevocable, spendthrift clause. Then he told me the truth. "At midnight on your 18th birthday, Fallon, legal control of these assets passes to you. At that moment, you have options. You can keep the existing structure in place, or you can move everything into a new one, designed entirely to protect you." I asked him what he recommended. He folded his hands and looked at me the way adults almost never looked at teenagers, like my answer mattered. "A new irrevocable trust," he said. "Independent corporate trustee. Sole beneficiary, you. Distributions for education, housing, medical needs, emergency living expenses. Your mother, Derek, and Brielle permanently excluded as trustees, beneficiaries, or recipients. No family-controlled entities, no loopholes." I repeated the word back to him. "Irrevocable means I can't undo it later?" "That's right. Not even if I want to?" He gave a sad little nod. "Not even then. That is what makes it safe. It protects you from pressure. It even protects you from your own guilt in a weak moment." I thought of my mother's hand on my wrist, her smile. Her sweet voice wrapped around words like responsibility and family and sacrifice. I said, "Okay." He did not look surprised. I think he had known which daughter I was before I did. Then he told me something else. The man who had been visiting my house was named Grant Barlow, a local estate lawyer with 2 prior disciplinary warnings from the state bar. He specialized, Daniel said carefully, in what polite people called aggressive family restructuring. Then he slid a folder halfway across his desk. I saw my name before I understood what I was looking at. Fallon Elise Hayes. The document title sat at the top in bold, Hayes Family Financial Unification Agreement. My stomach dropped. Daniel explained that a paralegal from Barlow's office had recently left the firm and quietly forwarded drafts she found troubling. There had been multiple versions. The package my mother and Derek were building would have made me a co-trustee with my mother, granted my mother durable financial power of attorney, and transferred a significant share of my trust interest into a holding company called Fallon Hayes Holdings, LLC. I read the signature page twice. It was dated February 28th. I was still 17 then. If they had gotten me to sign that version, my mother's signature would have been required as my legal guardian. I looked up and asked the only thing my mind could find first. How long? Daniel's eyes softened. At least 4 months. 4 months. 4 months of being called sweetheart. 4 months of being served pot pie and cocoa and little smiles. 4 months of hearing my future discussed in rooms I was not supposed to understand. 4 months of my mother sitting across from me at dinner while quietly preparing to build a legal cage around the only thing my grandfather had left that was purely mine. My hands should have shaken. They didn't. That frightened me a little, how calm I was, but it also gave me my answer. Then let's build mine first, I said. After that, everything became strangely simple. Not easy, never easy, but simple. I would go home and keep playing the quiet daughter, and behind that face I would become something else. We met twice more before my birthday, always under harmless cover stories, a campus visit, a scholarship meeting, a research appointment. Daniel introduced me to Northfield Trust Services, a corporate trustee with a clean reputation and no sentimental investment in my family's feelings. We built the new trust piece by piece, like engineers reinforcing a bridge before anyone realized the river was already rising. We named it the June Trust, after my grandmother. Daniel asked no questions when I chose the name. The terms were airtight. I was the sole beneficiary. Any future direct descendants of mine, if they ever existed, could follow after me under conditions I controlled. My mother, Vivian Hayes Cole, Derek Cole, Brielle Cole, permanently excluded from trustee and beneficiary status. No entity in which any of them held equity could ever touch the funds. Tuition, housing, books, medical expenses, emergency support, all covered through trustee-reviewed distributions. No creditors, no coerced withdrawals, no emotional manipulation disguised as family need. Irrevocable, unchangeable, untouchable. Daniel said the same thing twice in 2 different meetings, as if he wanted to make sure I really heard it. This trust protects you from them, he said. But Fallon, it also protects you from the version of yourself that may someday still wish they had loved you better. That one landed deep. Because that was the real danger, wasn't it? Not just greed, not just legal trickery. The bigger danger was that small ruined part of me that still wanted my mother to turn into someone else if I gave her enough chances. I signed practice copies twice, just to steady my hand. The final signing was scheduled for 12:01 a.m. on my birthday. The morning after, Daniel planned to call at 9:03 sharp. He told me, if they try anything over breakfast, let them. Let the moment ripen. Even Aunt Elena called me around that time, almost as if the truth had started moving underground from one relative to another. She was my father's younger sister, an ICU nurse in Pittsburgh, the kind of woman who sounded blunt because she had earned the right to stop decorating facts. I should have told you something years ago, she said. I stepped into the backyard to take the call, the air smelling like thawing grass and cold soil. What? Your dad wanted to change his will 6 months before he died, she said. He wanted a trust set up for you, with me as co-trustee. I sat down on the porch steps so fast I barely felt it. What happened? She did not hesitate. Your mother happened. Apparently, my father had planned to protect me with a structure she could not control. My mother cried, said it would destroy her trust in him, said it was betrayal. Said all the right words until he gave in and left everything to her instead. Life insurance, the house, all of it. I had found traces of those old papers already in a drawer weeks before. Aunt Elena simply gave the grief a shape. Then she said something I would not understand fully until much later. You are not the first person your mother has worked on. You're just the one your grandfather planned ahead for. She told me if I needed somewhere to go after my birthday, she had a spare room, a vicious gray cat named Walter, and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. I laughed for the first time in days. Then I cried after we hung up. Not because I was breaking, because something in me finally had permission to. The Sunday before my birthday, my mother made pot roast. Her something important is coming meal. Candles on the table, Brielle actually put her phone down. Derek acted almost cheerful. In the middle of dinner, I asked lightly, "Mom, what's the difference between a trust and a family account?" She lit up so fast it was almost ugly. "Oh, honey," she said, "trusts are so complicated. They fail all the time if they're not handled by people who actually care. Lawyers drain them dry with fees." Derek grunted agreement. "Family money belongs in family hands, not with some corporate outfit." The word corporate went through me like a pin. I had never used that word in front of him. Neither had she, but Barlow would have. I only nodded, spooning potatoes onto my plate like none of it mattered. Then Brielle, without looking up, said, "Mom said it was supposed to help all of us anyway." Silence. Utter silence. My mother's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Derek's jaw hardened. I felt the entire table tense at once. That electric family tension where everyone understands a boundary has just been crossed, but no one wants to name it. My mother recovered first. "She means family is a team," she said brightly. "Of course," I said. "This roast is amazing." I passed the gravy. Inside, I was counting days. 2 nights later, my mother announced a small pre-birthday dinner at Willow Creek Country Club. Small, in her language, meant 15 people and a chandelier. Her pastor and his wife came, Derek's business partner, my mother's women's circle co-chair, neighbors, donors, witnesses, really, though none of them knew it yet. During dessert, my mother rose and tapped her wine glass. "To my brave girl," she said, smiling at me across the table. "Who is going to make such smart decisions tomorrow?" Glasses lifted. I lifted mine too. Across the room, at a small table near the wall, a man in a navy blazer sat alone with a leather briefcase leaning against his chair. Mid-50s. Too much ring, too much polish. He looked toward Derek and gave the smallest nod. Derek nodded back. I didn't know his face yet, but I knew instinctively what he was. Grant Barlow had already shown up for the celebration of the theft. That was the thing about my family. They had never once mistaken confidence for cruelty in themselves. They called it planning, prudence, protection, love. I smiled at everyone at that dinner and drank my wine, and let them think they were watching a child on the edge of a bright future. At 11:47 p.m. on the night of my birthday, my bedroom door was locked. My laptop sat open on my desk. I wore old plaid pajama pants and a gray sleep shirt because I wanted to sign as myself, not as the polished version my mother would have preferred, but as the girl who had lived in that room and survived that house. A few minutes before midnight, Daniel joined the video call. Then, the trustee representative from Northfield appeared, followed by the online notary. By the time the final minute arrived, my heart was beating so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. "Ready?" Daniel asked. "Yes." The cursor blinked in the signature box. Then midnight. At 12:01, I typed my full legal name, Fallon Hayes. Every letter felt like a door locking behind me. The notary confirmed, Northfield confirmed. Daniel watched the screen. At 12:02, the transfer authorization appeared. I approved it. At 12:03, the trustee representative said, "Initiating transfer." At 12:04, she looked back up and smiled. Confirmed. $681,412.90. The June trust is fully funded and irrevocably executed. For a moment I couldn't breathe. Then Daniel looked into the camera and said, softly, "Happy birthday, Fallon. It's yours now." I closed the laptop and sat in the dark for a long time after the call ended. The house was silent around me. Downstairs, the refrigerator hummed. Somewhere in the pipes, something clicked. I pressed both palms flat to the desk to steady myself, and realized my hands were tingling. For the first time in 6 months, I was exhausted enough to sleep. And I did. The next morning I woke before my alarm. I showered, dried my hair halfway, put on jeans, a pale cashmere cardigan, and my grandmother's gold earrings. No makeup, no armor beyond what I had already done. I stood in front of the mirror and said out loud, to no one and to myself, "Quiet, daughter." Then I went downstairs. The kitchen smelled like pancakes and bacon. My mother was at the stove in a pink robe, her hair pinned back the way she wore it for brunches and holidays. She turned the instant she heard me and smiled with a softness so unusual it almost made my skin crawl. "There's my birthday girl." She hugged me. It lasted 3 seconds longer than any hug she had given me in years. Derek was already at the table. Brielle sat beside him in pajamas, her phone propped against the orange juice pitcher. And there, to the right of my mother's coffee mug, sat the manila folder. Not hidden. Not even pretending to be casual. My mother lit 3 thin candles and a stack of pancakes and told me to make a wish. I leaned down and blew them out, thinking only one thing: I hope Grandpa knows. I ate 2 bites before she folded her hands together and reached for the folder. "Honey," she said, all velvet and patience. "Now that you're 18, there's something grown-up we need to talk about. That money from Grandpa." I set down my fork. "Okay." She slid the folder toward me. "Just some simple family paperwork," she said. "Derek's attorney helped us put it together so we can all be smart moving forward." Derek added, "Nothing crazy. Just structure." Brielle had not touched her phone. I opened the folder. There it was. My full name. The title, Hayes Family Financial Unification Agreement. Underneath, in smaller print, Vivian Hayes Cole, successor co-trustee. Derek Cole, attorney-in-fact. I turned the page. Durable financial power of attorney to my mother. Transfer provisions to Cole Hayes Holdings LLC. A section allocating education support for Brielle Cole. Page after page of theft dressed up in polite formatting and words like stewardship, family alignment, shared priorities. My blood ran cold anyway. Not because I hadn't known. Because knowing and seeing are 2 different wounds. I kept my face neutral. "I'd like to read it," I said. My mother smiled too brightly. "Of course, sweetheart. Take your time." So I did. I read every page. Not skimmed, read. I turned each sheet carefully with both hands. Followed the paragraphs with one finger. Paused over legal terms as if I were trying to understand them for the first time. At 2 minutes, my mother's smile began to fray. At 4, she tapped her mug. At 5, Derek leaned back and said, "Fallon, you don't need every line." I looked up mildly. "I like to understand what I'm signing. It's just structure. Then it should be easy to explain." He frowned. I turned to the section assigning beneficial interest to the family company. "What is Cole Hayes Holdings exactly?" My mother blinked once. "A family entity for tax purposes." "When was it formed?" "I don't remember." Derek cut in. "Fallon, enough. Sign the flagged pages." I looked at him calmly. "How long have you known Grant Barlow?" The name landed like broken glass. My mother spoke too fast. "Sweetheart, we haven't even told you the attorney's name yet." "I know," I said. "That's what I'm noticing." Brielle finally looked up, wide-eyed. I turned to the last page and checked the footer. Generated December 14, 2025. Barlow and Finch, draft V4.3, 4 months, 4 drafts. I closed the folder gently and placed both palms on top of it. "Mom," I said, "this document was generated 4 months ago." She laughed, but there was no air in it. "Lawyers reuse templates. Templates don't include my middle name." I opened it again and pointed to Fallon Elise Hayes. "This is mine, specifically mine." My mother's mouth opened and closed once, like she was trying to rearrange herself quickly enough to stay in control. "We've been planning for your future," she said finally. "That's called parenting." Derek's voice hardened. "Sign the pages." I looked straight at him. "Your lawyer was at the country club 2 nights ago?" Neither of them moved. "Navy blazer," I said. Briefcase by his chair, Caesar salad. Brielle inhaled sharply. Now my mother tried the hurt voice instead, the one that used to work on church ladies and committee friends. "Fallon, honey, this is for your protection. You do not understand what happens when someone your age gets access to that kind of money. There are sharks out there." I let a beat pass. Then I said, "Before I sign anything, I'd like our family attorney on the phone to walk me through it." The word "our" shattered whatever control she still thought she had. "We don't need Daniel Mercer for this," she snapped before catching herself. "Barlow can explain it." I tilted my head. "Mom," I said softly, "I never told you who our family attorney was." The kitchen went still in that eerie way rooms do when even the refrigerator seems to stop humming. Her face changed. Not all at once, but enough. She tried to recover. "Your grandfather mentioned him years ago." "Grandpa's been gone 7 months," I said. "I have never said Daniel Mercer's name in this house." Derek shoved his chair back a few inches. "Fallon, stop." Brielle looked between all of us. "Wait, who's Mercer?" "No one," Derek barked. I kept my eyes on my mother. "When did you ask around?" I asked. She didn't answer. "Was it around the time you started meeting with Grant Barlow?" "Fallon, please." Then Derek lost his temper. "You little." He stopped himself, but too late. The vein at his temple was pulsing, his face had gone red. I felt something cold and lucid settle over me then, something almost peaceful. "I've been quiet for a long time," I said. "And people kept mistaking that for something else." My phone vibrated beside my plate. All three of them looked at it. The screen lit up with a name in clean white letters, Daniel Mercer, Esca. Right on time. My mother lost what little color she had left. Derek half rose from his chair. "Don't answer that." I picked up the phone. "I think I will." "Fallon." I was already tapping speaker. I set the phone down on the table between the syrup bottle and the folder. "Mr. Mercer?" I said evenly. "You're on speaker. I'm at the kitchen table with my mother, Vivian Hayes Cole, my stepfather Derek Cole, and my stepsister Brielle." His voice filled the room calm as stone. "Good morning, Fallon. Happy birthday. I hope I'm not interrupting breakfast." I looked at my mother. "No," I said. "We were just having a conversation about money. I thought perhaps you might be." There was a page turn on his end. Then he spoke with deliberate clarity. "I'm calling to formally confirm that the transfer we discussed completed successfully at 12:04 a.m. last night. The June Trust is fully funded. Northfield Trust Services has accepted trusteeship. The transaction is legally irrevocable." The sound that followed was almost not a sound at all. My mother's fork slipped from her hand and struck the plate with one clean metallic click. Derek's fingers curled into fists. Brielle whispered, "What?" Daniel continued in the same calm tone. "Total funded amount, $681,412.90. Initial tuition disbursement for Penn State has been pre-approved. Everything is in order." "What trust?" Derek choked out. "The June Trust," Daniel said pleasantly. "Established last night for Fallon's sole benefit." My mother turned to me as if seeing me for the first time. "You didn't?" I met her eyes. "Yes," I said. "I did." Brielle was staring at the phone like it might explode. Daniel went on, as if reading weather. "For clarity, the funds left by Walter Hayes to Fallon can now be used only for Fallon's benefit, under trustee review. They cannot be accessed by any third party, family member, or family-owned entity." Derek stood up fully. "This is..." "Mr. Cole," Daniel interrupted, still perfectly courteous, "I would strongly advise you not to finish that sentence." Derek stopped. Not because he had suddenly gained control. Because Daniel sounded like a man who had watched people ruin themselves with one more sentence too many. Then Daniel said, "There is one other issue I need to place on the record while we are all present." My mother made a sound then. Very small. More breath than voice. "No," he continued anyway. "Approximately 10 weeks ago my office received forwarded drafts from Barlow and Finch involving a minor beneficiary. The document package was titled Hayes Family Financial Unification Agreement. It appears to have been designed for execution while Fallon Hayes was still 17 years old." My mother whispered, "That's protected." "The forwarding is not the problem," Daniel said gently. "The content is." He began numbering his points. 1. The document currently in Fallon's possession is not enforceable. The assets it references are no longer legally available for assignment. 2. The February 28th execution date in prior drafts indicates an intent to secure Fallon's signature while she remained a minor under parental authority. 3. Any attempt by a guardian to redirect a minor child's inheritance into an entity in which that guardian or her spouse has financial interest constitutes a probable breach of fiduciary duty. 4. As of yesterday, I filed a formal complaint with the Pennsylvania Disciplinary Board regarding Mr. Barlow's role in drafting these materials. Derek stared at the phone. "You filed on Barlow?" "Yesterday at 4 p.m., Daniel said. "I do not expect he is returning calls today." The folder on the table looked different then. Not dangerous anymore, just pathetic, dead paper, evidence. I turned to my mother. "Look at me," I said. She did. Her eyes were rimmed red already. "Did you know what he was drafting?" "Fallon. Yes or no?" Her lips trembled. Then, in a voice so small it almost sounded childlike, she said, "Yes." Brielle made a sound I had never heard her make before. Not outrage exactly, not sobbing, more like the sharp inward crack of innocence splitting. Derek slammed his palm flat against the table so hard the salt shaker jumped. "You did all this behind our backs?" he shouted, not at me, but at my mother. I looked at him and almost laughed from sheer disbelief. "Behind your backs?" I said. I signed my documents at 12:01 a.m. under full legal capacity, in front of an attorney, a trustee representative, and a notary. You tried to do yours while I was still 17. His face purpled. We raised you. That was the line. The one that should have cut. The one they must have thought would fold me in half. Instead, something in me stood up. You moved into my house when I was 12, I said. What you raised was Brielle's brand, not me. My mother flinched. Brielle looked down at the table. Derek opened his mouth again, but Daniel cut in. Mr. Cole, this call is being documented for my client's protection. He sat down. Hard. I took the folder, turned to page 9, and read aloud the line I had already memorized. Acknowledgement of family financial priorities, including tuition assistance for Brielle Cole. Then I looked at all of them. So that was the plan? I asked quietly. To use my grandfather's money for her school? No one denied it. My mother started crying then. Real tears, I'll give her that. But they moved inside an old familiar script. Tears that still somehow asked to be centered. Tears that wanted to make me responsible for comforting the person who had just admitted she tried to steal from me. After everything I sacrificed for you, she said, this is how you repay me? I waited until the silence had room to hold the whole ugliness of that sentence. Then I said, I've been thinking about that word for a long time. Sacrifice. I'm willing to talk about it someday, with a mediator, or a therapist, or anyone neutral enough to tell the truth in this house. She shook her head violently. I do not need a stranger telling me how to be your mother. I think we needed one years ago, I said. Daniel's voice came back through the speaker. Fallon, Alina Hayes is parked at the end of your driveway. She is available to take you whenever you are ready. That was it. No dramatic monologue, no screaming, no shattered plates, just the clean, strange quiet that comes after a trap fails. I stood up. I picked up the folder, picked up my phone, walked to the coat rack and put on my jacket. At the door I turned once. Brielle was looking at me. Not her father, not my mother. Me. She looked 16 again, not polished, not smug, just scared. Brielle, I said, and my voice softened despite everything. You didn't build this, don't carry it for them. Text me in a year. She nodded once. My mother had her face in her hands by then. Derek stared at the table like the wood grain might save him. The pancakes were still warm. The syrup still golden. The whole breakfast looked offensively ordinary. Thank you for breakfast, I said. Then I walked out. The April light was pale and honest. Aunt Elena's Honda was waiting with the engine running at the curb. When I got in, she handed me a travel mug of coffee, looked once at my face and said, Did you win? I stared straight ahead through the windshield. No, I said after a moment. I protected what was mine. She nodded. Better. I thought leaving would feel like freedom. Instead, for the first few hours, it felt like collapse delayed by adrenaline. At Aunt Elena's apartment in Pittsburgh, I showered for 20 minutes, changed into sweats, and finally turned my phone over on the counter. 47 missed calls, 62 texts. My mother, my mother, my mother. Pastor Holloway, Donna from Women's Circle, an aunt on my mother's side I hadn't seen in 2 years, a neighbor, a family friend. Messages piled on top of each other like wet leaves. Call your mother. She is devastated. You do not understand what this is doing to her. Please be respectful. She has sacrificed everything. Young lady, this is not how family handles conflict. Aunt Elena looked over my shoulder and said, Block them. All of them? All of them. I hesitated. She'll tell everyone I abandoned her. Aunt Elena handed me tea. The truth is slow, Fallon. Let it walk. So I blocked 12 numbers and turned my phone to airplane mode. Then I slept harder than I had slept in years. Willow Creek was the kind of town that could make a verdict out of nothing by lunchtime. My mother went to church that Sunday in navy and cried during prayer requests. She stood up and said her daughter had left home suddenly in a state of confusion. But the problem with a performance is that sometimes the audience has already seen rehearsal. Pastor Holloway's wife had been at the country club dinner. She had heard my mother toast my smart decisions tomorrow. She had seen Derek mouth big day from across the table. She did not go over after service to hug my mother. She went home and started asking careful questions. At Brielle's school, the story slid through hallways faster than adults could contain it. Not the legal details. Teenagers rarely need the legal details. Just the shape of the thing. Mother tries to take daughter's inheritance. Daughter outsmarts them. People filled in the rest. Brielle was not the villain there. My mother was. Derek's finances, it turned out, had already been wobbling. His contracting business had debts stacked beneath the surface, minimum payments, overdue equipment leases, a second mortgage my mother had co-signed. He had been planning to steady everything with what he once referred to over drinks as new family capital. Banks do not care about family capital. Within weeks, one lender called in an equipment lien. Then another. A truck got repossessed. 2 concrete mixers followed. Derek moved out by May. My mother filed to separate their finances before he could drag her under with him. Brielle lost her Bucknell deposit and ended up choosing a far cheaper state option. I did not celebrate that. I never wanted her punished for their appetite. But it happened anyway, because greed rarely ruins only its intended victim. Grant Barlow's disciplinary case moved faster than most, because pattern always travels faster than reputation once the right people start speaking. The former paralegal gave a sworn statement. 2 other clients came forward. One was a widow. One was a retired teacher. Both had stories with the same flavor. Family LLCs, suspicious trust rewrites, vulnerable beneficiaries. 8 weeks later, Barlow was suspended for 3 years. Daniel emailed me the notice with no subject line and no body text, just the link. I wrote back one word, "Thank you." He replied 3 minutes later, "Justice isn't loud." I saved that email. I still have it. Because that was the real lesson of the whole thing. You do not always win by shouting. Sometimes you win by reading the page, by asking one calm question after another, by waiting until the truth is documented, witnessed, undeniable, by refusing to let your pain turn you reckless when precision will do more damage than rage ever could. Brielle texted me in late May. I didn't know she wanted all of it. I thought it was just some for my tuition. I didn't ask for that, I swear. I read it 3 times before answering. Aunt Alina saw my face, guessed who it was, and told me I didn't owe speed to anyone anymore. So I took 3 days. Then I wrote back. I know, you were in the kitchen, not behind the papers. I'm not angry with you. I'm not ready to be around Mom, but I'm not cutting you off. Coffee in a year, when you're 18 and on your own. I mean it, she replied almost immediately. Okay, then after a pause. Okay, Fallon. She hadn't called me that softly in years. By August, I had my Penn State housing assignment, a meal plan, a dorm room, and the first real sense that my life might be allowed to unfold forward instead of sideways. Aunt Elena and I packed her Honda with a quilt, a box of books, a desk lamp that had belonged to my grandfather, and the cedar box wrapped in an old towel like something sacred. When she dropped me off, she touched my cheek and said, "Your dad would be proud of you." I cried then, a little. Then I went upstairs and made my bed. College was not magical. It was better than magical. It was ordinary in ways that felt miraculous. Laundry, late-night studying, someone laughing down the hall without anyone shushing them. A roommate who hummed in the shower and said on the first day, "I don't talk to my mom either, so solidarity," and made me laugh loud enough that I startled myself. My mother texted twice that fall. "Are you safe?" Then later, "I miss you." I did not answer. Every Sunday, Aunt Alina called and asked me the same question in different words until one day she finally asked the right one. "How's your heart?" I looked out at the dorm window where early snow was touching the glass and thought about it. "It's quiet," I said. "Good quiet or bad quiet?" I smiled a little. "Good quiet." "That's peace," she said. Maybe it was. For so much of my childhood, quiet had meant danger. It had meant swallowed tears, controlled breathing, careful steps, measuring every expression for the cost it might invite. In college, in that small, overheated dorm room, quiet became something else entirely. Safety. A year later, just after midnight on my 19th birthday, I logged into the trust portal from a library desk by the window and looked at the statement. The value had grown. Tuition had been paid, housing covered, books, winter clothes, everything I had needed, handled with no pleading, no manipulation, no gratitude owed to the wrong people. At the bottom of the statement, in small italic letters, were the names of the trust's original source. Walter and June Hayes. I touched the screen lightly with 2 fingers. Then I closed the laptop and sat for a moment in the window glow, watching snow drift across the quad so slowly it looked almost suspended. I thought about my grandfather's 6 words. Your choice. Your life. I thought about my mother too, and I'll be honest with you. I did not hate her then. Not in the hot, clean way hatred sometimes promises. What I felt was colder and sadder. The kind of distance you feel toward a house you survived but would never sleep in again. Brielle had texted me that morning, a photo of her own dorm room, and one line beneath it. Coffee in May? I had replied, yes, I'll drive. That was the thing my mother never understood. Protecting myself did not make me cruel, it just made me unavailable for theft. And maybe that is the difference people like her can never forgive, when the quiet daughter stops confusing love with surrender. Because I was never dramatic, I was paying attention. And when the time came, I remembered everything.